Alright, what's going on, everybody? Today we're reacting to a Matt Walsh video. It's titled, "We Need to Stop Worshipping Multiculturalism or Face Total Destruction." And, I've done a quick little browse through, and it's his usual uneducated fear-mongering that plays into the fears of the uneducated masses. And frankly, that is basically all the right wing does now, is just stoke social divisions and attempt to create fear via the curation of scary-looking images and videos. It's pretty embarrassing. So if you don't know what's going on in LA, there have been mass protests as a result of the incursions of ICE into the immigrant populations there and the subsequent deportations that have taken place. Now, these protests, as all do, have broken out into some, disputes. There have been videos circulating of cars burning and rocks being thrown at ICE vehicles and other police vehicles, as well as some of the officers themselves. And I think that any reasonable person can condemn those actions. But at the same time, one can admit, if they have even the slightest shred of discernment, that the right wing is hardcore playing up these protests and pretending that they're anything like, some of the mass protests that we've seen throughout the history of our country. The reality is we're seeing tons of videos come out from both, like I think Hassan, which I'm not a Hassan fan, but he is going to these protests and streaming. We're seeing TikTok videos of people at these protests. They're not some mass riot. There aren't, cars just burning everywhere, buildings being broken into, looting happening, and people just getting. It's the reality is, in fact, most of the absurd behavior that we've seen has actually come from the law enforcement that's there. I mean, if you haven't seen, there's been videos of like them shooting reporters with rubber bullets. It's clearly an attempt to foment social division. It's an attempt to make California and maybe Newsom look bad as a means to discredit him preemptively. They probably fear that he's going to run in 28 or something like that. And it's a means to, Trump preemptively, prior to actual justification, deploy the National Guard. It was an attempt to make him look good. In reality, it's just really an unjustified response and an overplaying of a group of protests that have taken place. Not only that, the protests are 100% justified because the immigration policies espoused by the right are just ludicrous, both for the consequences that they would have for our country and for the indiscriminate nature in which they are applied. They're not being done in a manner that's targeting criminals. They're done indiscriminately to any illegal immigrant. And the reality is these people prop up many important sectors of our economy. And so advocating for their removal is advocating for nothing less than the stagnation and decline of our country, which is just the economic reality. But without further ado, we're going to get into this video. We're going to watch it in like 1.5 speed. Let me make sure that I have it on that. Yeah. Because honestly, I can't stand Matt Walsh. He is so uneducated and so stupid. Yeah. So prepare for curated videos and unjustified logical leaps as a means to stoke fear in the hearts of his viewers.
Culturalism inevitably means the decline of the West and everything we value. We have to sit back and watch our civilization decay in real time. Now that hordes of illegal aliens have decided to demolish sushi restaurants and liberate iPhones from Apple stores in Los Angeles as a very roundabout way of...
Just right off the bat, just like a ludicrous claim. First off, do we think that most of these protesters are illegal, or are you just assuming that on the basis of their race? The right has veered into full-on, open, unmasked racism. And the reason they did it is because their attempted milquetoast brand that they pushed for so long has been, rejected by the right wing. And there is a rise of figures like Nick Fuentes and stuff like that. And so they're trying their best to, regroup and attempt to claim some share of the right wing. But I think everyone, right and left, sees through this nonsense. This guy is a thing of the past. He's a joke. But okay, so we have one laughable claim right off the bat.
making the case that California is really Mexican territory and that no person is illegal, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we're not the only country that's experiencing a series of major riots at this exact moment. Over in Northern Ireland, the locals have also been taking to the streets all week. In the small town of Ballymena, a population of roughly 31,000, hundreds of rioters have been throwing Molotov cocktails, launching fireworks, smashing store windows with bricks, and these riots have also spread to places like Belfast. Now, some cars have also been destroyed, trash cans were set on fire, more than a dozen people, including police officers, have been injured. And even as the police use water cannons to try to disperse the rioters, they keep coming back. On the surface, the mayhem might seem similar to what's happening in Los Angeles. In fact,
I haven't looked into these at all, so I'm not really going to comment much on what's going on in Ireland.
the non-combatants are using similar tactics. In LA, some people are hanging Mexican flags outside their stores in the hopes of deterring rioters from attacking. And in Northern Ireland, they are hanging British flags. But there's at least one very big difference between these two riots, and you can probably guess the difference based on the flags I just mentioned. In Northern Ireland, they're not rioting to demand open borders. They're not angry that the federal government is enforcing immigration law. On the contrary, they are rioting precisely because the government is not enforcing immigration law. They're tired of the fact that foreign nationals have been allowed into their country with essentially no limitation whatsoever, and their cause gained new urgency over the weekend when two 14-year-old migrant children allegedly...
Also, I'll just say, the riots are not for open borders, and they're not for enforcing immigration policy. They're a response to the indiscriminate deportation of illegal immigrants, criminal and non-criminal. People who have been here for 40 years versus people who have been here for 5 years. Do you really think that there would be protests en masse if you were deporting criminals? No, obviously not. You are quite literally going into established communities, breaking apart families, and eventually you're going to destabilize important sectors of the economy. I mean, you see even Trump on Truth Social or whatever admitting this, that there is disruption in the agricultural sectors. People are upset because, they're not able to find workers. The reality is these people ignore the fact that the native populations to this country, I'm not actually referring to the American Indians, I'm referring to, we could say white people and black people would probably be the stock of America. They are aging rapidly, and the population pyramids don't look great with regard to those specific demographics. And what that means is that when people say, why don't we just have high schoolers do these jobs? People like this, when they say that the underlying meaning is why don't we have white high schoolers do these jobs, it's because there are not as many white high schoolers as you think. There are not enough to go around to do these jobs. That's the plain reality. Yes, there are other benefits to illegal immigration, such like, for example, you can pay them lower wages, which is good for the economy. And I'm not, normatively loading that. I'm not saying that's a good thing that, we do that. I'm saying objectively that is good for the economy, and that is a benefit of illegal immigration, and that's why there's been this covert acceptance of, or rather implicit acceptance of illegal immigration over the past, few decades on both the right and the left. But the bigger problem is simply that we don't have the population base to support the labor necessary to give rise to a growing economy. And that's why it's being imported.
Attacked a teenage girl in the town and sexually assaulted her. This is just the latest in a string of attacks by so-called quote-unquote asylum seekers in Ireland in recent months, and the Irish have had enough. So what exactly can we learn from these two events?
Absolutely nothing. If you're going to try to draw some broad extrapolation on the basis of two events, that just shows you are low IQ. It takes more than two events to establish a strong inference. Like, that's just so dumb.
Coincidentally are happening at the same time in two very different places. Well, it's easy to condemn violence, but condemning violence doesn't prevent violence from happening in the future. You have to address the underlying cause. And what's happening in Northern Ireland and Los Angeles right now give us a pretty good idea what that underlying cause is. It turns out that when you flood native populations with foreigners, you get violence and dysfunction, one way or another. Either the foreign nationals will wage an explicit war of secession, as they're doing in California.
This is just so dumb because the underlying presupposition is that violence doesn't precede these events, but rather as an antecedent or downstream effect from the introduction of a population into a native population. The reality is violence is perennial. It always exists. Conflict always exists. It sublimates through different forms and through different instantiations, but that doesn't mean that the underlying violence isn't always extant. It is. Okay? There wasn't racial diversity during the time of, the religious wars of old Europe, and yet those were some of the bloodiest, most consequential wars and conflicts ever waged in Western history. Are you going to blame that one on the Mexicans? Just so stupid. This guy is an idiot.
Or the foreign nationals will commit so many violent acts of terrorism, including acts of terrorism that destroy the lives of children, that the natives simply can't tolerate it anymore, and then they lash out. In both cases, we're witnessing the...
What violent acts of terrorism, by the way? Like, if he's talking about America specifically, again, I don't know anything about Ireland. If you're talking about America specifically, LA was not some, hellscape prior to this. It was the introduction of instability that came about as a consequence of these actions done by the Trump administration. Okay? These effects are new. Okay? California recently replaced Japan as the world's the fourth largest economy in the world. I think they're doing okay. This attempted fabrication of instability, I had some coffee. This attempted fabrication of Californian instability is nonsensical. By every metric, California outperforms every single red state in the country. By economic measures, by educational measures, they carry the country. They carry a lot of these red states, which have poor educational systems, higher rates of criminality, lower GDPs. They do not contribute positively to the country. And so while these people complain about all of these various, attributes of, California, whether it's multiculturalism or whatever, they rely on those very same things for the production, or they rely on the production of those very same things. So, you're just biting the hand that feeds you. It's despicable.
Inevitable failure of the cult of diversity. In every case, reality disproves the claim that we hear so often that diversity is our strength. At the moment, Democrats are trying to portray the riots in Los Angeles as anti-ICE protests, but...
Does it? I mean, is that why the most diverse areas in the country are also, the richest? What are some of the richest states in the country? California, New York. Now, you can say Texas is a red state, but Texas is also diverse. I mean, that's where some of the most immigrants are going. Also, it's kind of funny if we're talking about sort of the left-right divide. You look at a map of the, areas of Texas that produce the most and contribute the most towards the GDP, and those also happen to be the bluest areas in Texas. It's kind of weird. I don't know. It's almost like your policies and your ideology doesn't actually work.
That's not remotely accurate, of course. No sane person believes that it's some great tragedy that ICE is rounding up murderers and sexual abusers. The goal of the riots in LA...
Yeah, if only they were doing that. I mean, what are you talking about? They're literally going onto, construction sites and pulling people out of work. Were those people murdering people? What are you talking... This is just nonsensical. And the fact that it's, convincing so many people is truly disheartening. I mean... If there's one thing this whole, ordeal has shown me, it's that the American population, specifically the right wing, is just like a dumb mass of people that can be manipulated at will. And it's just insane. Show them a curated list of videos, a curated series of videos, and they will instantly believe that LA is melting down, even as, Hassan walks through the streets on a live stream. It's probably pre-recorded, because, LA is on fire, so I don't know how he's there.
Very clearly, is to establish the supremacy of one ethnic group over another. That's generally what happens when very different ethnic groups with very different conceptions of acceptable human behavior are forced to live on top of one another. Now, it's become commonplace to hear accusations of...
And again, this is just absurd. The underlying presupposition there is that for most of history we've been, homogenous? What are you talking about? If you look at the trajectory of history... There has always been an ebb and flow with regard to the contraction and expansion of societies. Take, for example, the beginning of Western civilization, and what was the political unit? It was the Greek city-state. It was the polis, right? After the decline of that, we had the instantiation of empires, which culminated with the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire oversaw an age of expansion. It oversaw the introduction of various peoples into its empire, and as a result, they had to turn to cosmopolitan philosophies like Stoicism. But nevertheless, are we going to say that they weren't stronger, bigger, and more imposing than the thing that they replaced? Obviously they were, and yet they were more diverse. They were multi-ethnic, they were multiracial, they had multiple religions. And so what are you talking about? Diversity is concomitant with expansion, and expansion is concomitant with things like empire. But, this guy doesn't know that. He's never read a book in his life. This guy has no education. He sits here with this stupid flannel shirt, and he, is here just to divide. He's not here to, educate. He's not here to better the society. He's not here to think about how we can actually move forward and improve. He's here to create division and profit at the expense of that division. Because guess what? The elites love a divided mass. It's a lot easier to conquer and control you when you're divided by, race or ideology or whatever. I'm just so tired of these people.
Bigotry or white supremacy when, you talk like this, but it's essential, especially after what we're seeing in Los Angeles, where store owners are now boarding up their windows at night, to understand that
Oh, wow. It looks really dangerous. Look at all these riots going on.
everyone becomes an extremist when they're defending something they actually care about. I mean, why do you think the left is suddenly claiming that Mexico actually owns California? What happened to all the Indian tribes
And it's kind of weird that they're able to board up their window in the middle of the night.
who used to live in California? The ones we've been
You'd think all the rioters would be attacking them while they're doing that.
told are the true owners of all the land in the continent. They got there before the Mexicans, but all of a sudden, the Indians' claim to the land doesn't matter. Instead, the president of Mexico's Senate just came out and threatened to seize land from the United States. Now, he's not speaking English, so I'll read from the translation. Quote, names don't lie.
We're going to skip in a little bit just because this is kind of impertinent, and also it's an 18-minute video. I don't want to make like a 45-minute
The most
video.
spoke right to violate he told. So now they're celebrating colonialism suddenly. They're saying that because the Spanish colonized Los Angeles and called it part of New Spain back hundreds of years ago. And
This is just like he's latching on to some claim that, like, California belongs to Mexico. That's like that's a stupid point. No one's seriously advocating for, giving California back to Mexico. Like, just stop arguing in straw men.
and do anything that brought civilization and prosperity to that territory over a period of years, will use any argument they can think of in order to defend their preferred ethnic group and nationality. They don't care if it's hypocritical. They don't care if it's unfair. They'll do it anyway.
Coming from the guy who defended Shiloh Hendricks, like, what are you talking about? You will defend anything on the basis of in-group preference. Let's not go there.
And that's why multiculturalism in every context is failing.
Is it? Again, California replaced Japan as the fourth largest economy. The third largest economy is New York. Most educated places are blue. Massachusetts, for example, is the most educated state, and it's a blue state, and it's a diverse state. So this idea is simply nonsense. Are the smartest people in our country, which, by the way, yes, if you look at IQ studies, the left has a higher IQ on average than the right wing. When you're talking about liberals or conservatives, liberals are higher IQ. So are the smartest people in our country also the worst decision makers? Every metric that is measurable, that is quantifiable, favors liberals, favors people on the left. Intelligence, education, wealth, status. And yet these people, we're supposed to believe that these people are worse at making decisions. Every single thing that they believe in, it's actually wrong. And we should, listen to like the guy who shops at Walmart? It's nonsense. The left needs to get better at defending itself, because they let these people hurl these insults when they are honestly the weak link in the country. And, this constant complaining, it's just getting old.
It's why we're seeing riots everywhere, not just in Ireland and California. Katie Daviscourt at the...
Are we seeing riots everywhere in the same way that we're apparently seeing crime everywhere? Whenever you look actually at the trajectory of crime, you see that there's been a decline since the peak of crime in the 90s. Like, again, assertions with no evidence.
At the post-millennial shot, this footage from Seattle, for example, rioters are besieging federal buildings, torching American flags, blockading officers, throwing rocks at buildings. Watch.
Look at all the Mexicans. At the same time, he wants to say it's all these Mexicans who won't assimilate, these illegals, these multicultural illegals. These look like white people to me. So is it multiculturalism? Is culture tied to ethnicity? So is it really multi-ethnic societies that can't function? I mean, you're going to have to figure out whether it's the Mexicans causing this or if it's left-wing white people, because your argument kind of hinges upon that. The answer to that question will give rise to differing conclusions, but you're not interested in making a good faith argument. You just are here to spew bullshit. So and again, I mean, I'm seeing like mostly white people. So how is this building the case for the damaging effects of multi-ethnic societies? And again, the thing you have to remember, guys, is social media is curated. When you see videos, they are not representative of everything that happens. And so this idea that you can pick out some videos of, protests gone awry and then make conclusions about all protests that are happening with regard to the, thing in dispute, it's just absurd.
Now, as the day went on, the rioters in Seattle shot fireworks directly.
You know that these things are not that serious when this is one of the clips you're zeroing in on. Like, I get they're burning the American flag. That's, not good, but at the end of the day, it's a form of expression, and we have freedom of expression. But this doesn't look very scary. I don't think I would feel threatened if I was standing around. You have, like, group of people standing around talking, she's checking her phone. This guy's on the phone. This guy has some tiny little puny fire, and he's attempting to put a flag in the fire that's bigger than the fire itself. Again, like, how dramatic are you? These are the same people who say, don't tread on me, by the way. Like, give me a break.
As the day went on, the rioters in Seattle shot fireworks directly at officers outside of a federal building, leading to a brawl, which you can see here.
Okay, so there were like some fireworks thrown, and now they're like beating people up. Again, how is this making anyone but the officers actually, like, listen, I don't support that. And, fine if they want to do some force, but, like, are you kidding me? This is the scary riots and protests that are happening. Even the curated videos are laughably unintimidating. I mean, like, look at the disproportionate response. There was, like, a firework thrown, and they're, like, spraying mace and, like, sprinting at people and tackling them, and it's just, dude.
And similar violence is on display in many other cities, including Austin, Dallas, New York. You'll notice that most of the mayhem isn't even directed at ICE. For example, in Atlanta, rioters have taken turns destroying police cars and shooting fireworks at officers. Watch.
Hold on, stop. Over the camera, again. This is well practiced. This is a cone that they smoke grenades in here. They're putting, it's a perfect tactic here. You gotta be careful because of all the smoke grenades. Yeah, they're starting to go. But they're putting cones.
And again, I do think that we should make it clear that, you shouldn't support violence, especially not right now. And, like, there are times, obviously, when some violence is justified, see the American Revolution or something like that. But, this is not one of those times. And so I unequivocally condemn any, violence and riots that do take place. But I can say that while simultaneously admitting that they are 100% playing these up for a political purpose.
They're putting cones on the smoke grenades.
Among many other failures that are evident in that video, this is a failure of assimilation. One culture that doesn't respect the rule of law is clashing with another culture that does. And
again, a failure of assimilation, those have, like, the vast majority of the people you just showed were white. So why are you pulling the assimilation card? Also, assimilation to this guy means, being right-wing. Did you know that Hispanics actually moved further to the right than white people did over this last election? In fact, there was actually a leftward shift amongst cohorts in the white population, whereas Hispanics universally moved right. So if that's not assimilation, then what is? The reality is these people don't care about assimilation. They could assimilate or they could not assimilate. Either way, it supports their narrative. It's unfalsifiable nonsense that is ultimately justified on the basis of racial tribalism. I mean, that's all it is. That's all it will come down to eventually. And the mask has been slipping for a while. And, they will continue to display this repugnant nonsense until they're irrelevant and unable to capture the majority in political election.
by the way, the implications of this culture clash are a lot more pervasive than you might realize. For example, around 15 years ago, the government in the UK ran a study to see if the race of jurors had an impact on the outcome of criminal trials. And here's what they found after conducting a mock trial. Now, it's a really extraordinary chart. As you can see, 39% of white jurors wanted to find the white defendant guilty after hearing all the evidence. But
again, I'm going to skip a little bit because I don't really have time. And I mean, this is kind of impertinent. Yeah, it sucks that people are tribalistic, but that doesn't mean you play into it and become tribalistic yourself.
When the defendant, while 24% in the UK or in this country or any other country, has followed up on this data. And I only saw it because it was flagged recently by Jonathan Pallison, a social science researcher. But you think there'd be a lot of interest in this particular topic? I mean, if this data is accurate.
In other words, I only saw it because it popped up on my Twitter feed.
It suggests tribunals instead. And we've seen
that's like right-wing research is going on Twitter.
Signs of that, of course, most famously the OJ trial. More America's schools has decayed dramatically due to the alleged blessings of diversity. One of the best
Has it? Is that why the best educational institutions, whether you're talking about universities or the public schooling, K through 12, or private institutions, is that why they exist almost universally in blue states, in the states that promote and accept and tolerate multiculturalism? Again, this is just nonsense. Where are the worst educational systems? Red states, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama. These places are the literal bottom of our educational institutions, both in outcomes and in the quality of the institutions that exist there. So, I mean, what are you talking about?
Illustrations of the dangers of the religion of multiculturalism came to us this week from Andrew Cuomo. Now, of course, he wasn't trying to show why multiculturalism is dangerous. He wasn't trying to expose the cult of diversity, but he did unintentionally. So here's Andrew Cuomo, who wants to become the next mayor of New York, celebrating the fact that 180 different languages are now spoken in the New York school system. And naturally, of course, he says all this while decked out in ethnic garb. But listen to this.
The city of New York. We are the capital of diversity. 180 languages spoken in our school system. 180 different languages, people from all across the world. That makes us stronger, not weaker.
The capital of diversity, he says proudly. Now, if it's true that there are 180 languages spoken in the New York school system, that is not something to brag about. That is rather a testament to the total insanity of multiculturalism. It is proof, as if we needed more, that diversity is certainly not our strength.
How? What? You're just asserting that.
And that's why Cuomo can only assert that this huge plurality of languages...
Ironic. You are just asserting. Like, you're literally just saying 180 languages equals bad. Why?
...is a strength, but he can't explain or defend that point in any detail. Like, I have a follow-up question for you, Cuomo. And it's a very simple one. It's the most obvious one. What exactly is the benefit of having a system where people cannot speak to each other or understand one another?
That's a jump. That's a logical jump. Those are not the same. He just equivocated. He just switched the premise. No. Saying there are 180 languages spoken is not the same thing as saying you can't understand each other. Okay? I mean, like, what are you talking about? People can speak multiple languages. Do you think if someone speaks English and Spanish, I can't understand them because I don't speak Spanish? How stupid are you? I mean, like, literally. But, I do think this guy's dumb, but he's not that dumb. A lot of this is just dishonesty because he's a grifter.
I mean, did you read about the Tower of Babel and think that it's a blueprint to follow? I think you might have misunderstood the story. Like, so please give me an example of a scenario where you would walk into a place, hear people speaking all different languages.
Okay, we're going to skip in again because he's just hammering in a point that's an unjustified, illogical jump. And he's a rambler, so you have to kind of skip through this stuff.
Communicate with each other.
I told you, I just skipped literally like 20, 30 more seconds in, and he's still talking about it.
Best way to accomplish any task, least of all is it the best way to accomplish the task of building and maintaining a country. There are a few things that are fundamentally necessary in order for a nation to continue existing.
Let's hear it. Matt Walsh, the political theorist. What are the necessary conditions for a nation to exist? I really trust your opinion on this.
Or to exist in the first place. A shared language is one of those things.
A shared language is one of them. What's your evidence for that? The fact that most countries have had a shared language? I mean, the Roman Empire had multiple languages. The Macedonian Empire had multiple languages. Like, what are you talking about? Not only that, but if you look at Rome, the elites spoke different languages depending on the, there was the philosophical language of Greek and the common language of Latin. I mean, there have always been linguistic differences and exchanges that have happened, especially when you're talking about an expansive empire, which we are. So, I mean, what are you talking about? But not only that, but the proposition that languages require as a necessary condition a shared language is not established on the basis of historical precedent. If that was true, then you could go back to the time whenever most countries had slaves and say, hey, most countries have had slaves and most countries have slaves, therefore slaves are necessary. Would that argument follow? Of course not. Just goes to show how absurd this argument is too.
A shared culture is another.
But this guy doesn't have the kind of intellectual or academic rigor to make an argument. No one's going to push back against him because, he lives in an echo chamber.
One which is built on top of your shared language. If you have a country with hundreds of languages and hundreds of cultures...
And again, we'll skip in because he's going to ramble about this point.
Title. We must be united around something. By something.
Okay, so as a country, we must be united around something. Do you think that means we must be united around race? Skin color? Hair color? Eye color? No. The entire point of America is that it's a propositional nation. We're united around something, an ideal. We're united around a constitution. I mean, you don't understand the history of America? I mean, like, what are you talking about? We've known that this was an experimental nation since it was founded. It's always been a propositional nation. So, like, I mean, just so stupid. Not only that, but these type of people act like nation states are the, necessary form of existence for political entities. They arose literally a few centuries ago with the Treaty of Westphalia. Prior to that, nation states were not extant in the modern form. There were prior historical analogs, but let's not pretend that those are the things that only existed, or that even constituted the majority of extant societies rather.
Something more than just mere geographical proximity. But when you see these riots breaking out across the country, what you're looking at is the fruits of diversity. These are people we have nothing in common with, people with whom we are not united and can never be united.
Who are you referring to? Like, you're saying we can never unite with Mexicans because they're of a different race? I mean, that's just absurd.
In any meaningful way whatsoever. Again, a nation...
We can never unite with them in any meaningful way whatsoever. What an extreme and unjustified claim that just came out of this idiot's mouth. I would just love to sit down with this guy. I mean, he is so stupid.
Regresses when it begins to worship the idol of multiculturalism. In Australia...
Yeah, like we've been regressing. You could take the figure that they always like to cite is that America was 90% white up until, I believe, like the 90s or something. We're richer than we were in the 90s. We have more powerful and influential companies than we had in the 90s. We have more... you couldn't say we don't have more geopolitical influence. I mean, that was after the fall of the Soviet Union and sort of the period of American hegemony. But that's not really due to a decline in our status, but rather a relative decline as a result of the rise of other nations. But we are on the precipice of a technological revolution, the likes of which the world has never seen, with a chance to dominate the geopolitical future as a result of the preponderance of American artificial intelligence companies. And so, like, we are better off than we were in the 90s. Crime is lower, for example. And so, again, these assertions without evidence are just that. They're assertions without evidence.
Their politicians will come right out and admit it. So here's a remarkable clip from a premier in Australia from just a few weeks ago. Listen to this.
There's been some that have been agitating in the parliament to nullify the laws, to remove them off the statute books. Think about what kind of toxic message that would send to the New South Wales community. And I think the advocates for those changes need to explain, what do they want people to have the right to say? What kind of racist abuse do they...
Okay, I think we've basically covered it. He's not, if I remember right, he doesn't. I think he just shows some clips of people from other countries. It's not much I'm going to be able to say on that. I don't know much about those other countries. But if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out my Twitter, check out my Substack. This guy's a joke. He is completely uneducated. Literally just, I don't want to say off the cuff reacting because I did skim the video before, but you don't even have to prepare to react to this guy. He makes unjustified logical leaps. He makes assertions without evidence. He's completely historically illiterate. And these types of people honestly should just be shamed for how